and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to The Prod. I am your host, Jim Fogarty, coming to you up above Dave Grohl Alley in beautiful downtown Warren, Ohio, from Two Ticks and the Dog Productions. And I've got an incredible artist on today. She is a 5-time Academy Award nominee, nominated for production design and set decorator. But before I get to her and introduce her, I want to shout out our incredible sponsors of Season 4. They are the Station Square Restaurant, Modern Methods Brewery, Prosperity Partners, Salvatore's Italian Grill, and I'm forgetting one. It's a good thing I have them written down. Oh my God, it's Brokers Realty. Sorry, Dan Alvarez, love you. If you're selling a house, call my friend Dan Alvarez up. He will hook you up. She's a 5-time Academy Award nominee. She is fresh from Sherman Oaks, California. She's visiting her hometown, Warren, Ohio. This is like one of the coolest things ever, and we're going to get into this later and start mentioning some of the folks that are from here. But if you're from Warren or the greater Warren area, I'm always amazed at the level of talent that comes out of Warren, and especially the level of talent that also came out of Kent State University. She is a Golden Flash alum, Miss Linda DeScenna. Thank you for coming on the show and welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. Linda came in town to see her brother, and she graciously spent some time. Oh, I'm sorry, her 3 brothers. Yeah.
Don't want to leave any out.
Yeah, we don't want to get you in trouble. She came in town and graciously spent the afternoon, or I should say the morning with us, shooting some promo stuff and doing an interview with Andy Gray from the Warren Tribune. And we talked about the sci-fi, or soon to be the sci-fi museum, which will go in on Main Street. And the reason Linda is here is because, or the reason that we're interviewing her, and she's talking about the Sci-Fi Museum, is because she was a set decorator and production designer on movies like Blade Runner and Galaxy Quest and Star Trek the movie and all these and other non-fiction or non-science fiction films. How did you get into movies and art? And tell us just a little bit about your background growing up in Warren, and how did you get into all that stuff?
Well, I was an art major in college, and I also in high school. I always took art classes and had a phenomenal teacher, Mr. Breckner, who was just wonderful. And I was an art major at Kent, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I left Kent. I wasn't sure. I just knew it was going to be in the arts, but I just always was interested in it, and it was just kind of part of my life.
And you went to Howland High School?
Yes.
We won't hold it against you because, we're JFK people. And
yeah.
And we share some similar friends, some similar acquaintances and friends, Dave Pack and Doug Thomas. And you were like real hip to the music scene. You mentioned a bunch of folks, Gary McCoy.
Yeah. Gary Slows.
Yeah. How did that time in Warren and growing up in Howland, how did that inspire you to go to Kent and get into art? Was music like a big part of your growing up?
Yeah, music was the Beatles. I was 13 or whatever, 63, and the Beatles. I always loved the British invasion, right? And then Doug and Dave had the Holes in the Road and the Jags, and music was a lot in my life. And I don't think it had anything to do with going to Kent, but it was always really important.
It seems like artists always kind of gravitate towards one another, even if they're from different mediums.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Kent, I was thinking about this the other day. We had the pleasure to interview last year to interview John Zabrucki from Modern Props, and Jerry Casale was at the dinner, and Jerry started talking about, and you can help me with the Democratic Society for a Free...
SDS.
Yes.
Students for a Democratic Society.
And that was kind of like at the heart of the May 4th Kent State shootings.
Yes.
And these guys were talking about like that day and how it happened. And then we started talking about how there were so many people, yourself included, in the late 60s and early 70s at Kent State that went on to have these incredible careers. We've got Linda DeScenna. I know you know her. You have Mark Mothersbaugh and Jerry Casale that formed Devo. Chrissy Hine from The Pretenders. Michael Keaton was at Kent. Did you know Michael? I didn't find that out until just recently.
No, but I didn't know he was from here, yeah.
Michael Keaton went to Kent. Obviously, John Zabrucki was there. Joe Walsh was there. Who am I forgetting? Ray Wise.
Chrissy Hine from The Pretenders. Yeah.
What was that like? What was so special about that place and that time? Dominic Senna was there. Sorry, Dom, I almost left him out. All these incredible artists and musicians and filmmakers that went to have like incredible careers. You guys had incredible careers. What was like the secret sauce that was happening there? What were they putting in the water?
Well, I don't know if it was because of the hippie movement, the anti-war movement that made people more wanting to explore that, perhaps, and weren't afraid to explore it, if it was singing or in a band or painting or sculpting or whatever it was. I think it had a lot to do with that. I don't want to say looseness, because that's not the term I mean, but just a willingness to be more free, maybe.
Did you know a lot of those folks at Kent State?
I knew John and Jerry and Joe Walsh. I didn't know Chrissy Hine. She was a little younger than I was. Who else? Mark Mothersbaugh, because John was a friend, and then John and Jerry and Mark Mothersbaugh were all friends. So we all sort of hung out, and then Jerry and Mark came out to California, and they actually lived in an apartment right across the way from my apartment.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So were those guys Devo at the time when they came out?
Yes, they had started Devo. I think when they were juniors, maybe.
And that was like what, short for like de-evolution?
Yeah, de-evolution.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're out in California. Take me through that process. You graduate Kent State. You said you were an art major and a film minor.
Yeah.
How'd you end up in LA? Just you wanted, that's the work you wanted to do, or?
Well, the reason I ended up in LA initially is when I was 19, I'd never met my father, and when I was 19, I met my father, and he lived in San Jose, and so I went to visit him in San Jose, and my boyfriend went to Venice, and so I used to go down to Venice before I graduated. And I really liked it. So that then when I was ready to move, I graduated from Kent in 71, but I stayed in Kent for another couple years. So in 73, I then went out with a friend in a pickup truck with $300. And we stayed in the back of the pickup truck at night and slept. Oh my God, we'd be killed now. Ay, ay, ay. So anyway, and decided I really liked LA and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I just knew I was going to be in the arts doing something, but I didn't have any plan.
Wow.
Except that I knew I could be a waitress if I got into trouble.
Did you wait tables here in town?
During school summers and stuff. Yeah.
Any places you remember?
I was at the Howard Johnson's in Akron.
Okay.
Big time. And I'm trying to think. There was one other place here, but I can't remember the name of it. I don't remember.
So you get out to LA and you get a job waiting tables.
We were in Venice. Yeah, I didn't work that summer though, because I had my big $300 then.
Which was loaded.
Which was a lot of, it was enough for the summer in those days. So 73, and then had a roommate whose boyfriend. Should I go through this whole story?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a roommate.
If you want.
I'll try to shorten it. A roommate whose boyfriend had a friend who was an executive at ABC Circle Films, and I got a job as a production secretary. I taught myself how to type in 2 weeks and got the job. Met an art director. He took a liking to me, introduced me to a woman who wanted to help women. There were no women as set dressers then in the union. It was all men. And she said I could do it. I could follow around, but I couldn't get in the union because it was loaded. So I got a waitress job at a really expensive place, made a lot of money for 6 months. And then I came back to her and said, I can follow around. And while I was following around, the unions opened. And she said, do you want to be one of the first women set dressers? There are 3 of them from different studios, and you can get in. So I got in as a set dresser and got my 30 days.
Wow. You told a story earlier about Frank Sinatra.
Oh yeah, he used to leave me $100 every time he was in there, and that was a lot of money then.
Yeah,
oh
right.
my God, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What
it was
was-
the El Padrino room in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, so it was swanky.
Wow.
Yeah.
So thanks, Frank Sinatra. You were able to because you had
Well,
said
the costumes helped too. They were a little
yeah.
risque, so I'm sure.
Now you saved your money up because you had to.
I saved my money so that when I went back to Audrey and said, okay, I can follow her, and I needed money to live on because I wasn't getting paid for that. It was sort of just on the and it's very clandestine. I just kind of followed the set dressing crews around with a decorator and just observed and watched. But I couldn't be paid because I couldn't get in the union because in those days they wouldn't allow anybody in unless everybody was working.
So almost like an apprenticeship in a sense.
Yeah, a non-paid apprenticeship that she kind of made up.
So, for the I call my listeners prodders, for the prodders out there, kind of give us a sense of, what a set decorator and a production
Production designer.
Thank you. My mouth's sticking together. Production designer does, and how's that different from like an art director?
Well, the production designer is in charge of the whole look of the film. They meet with the director and the cinematographer. They set the whole tone. They set the palette. They create everything. They create the world. And the production designer has an art director working for them who's like the foreman of the crew. And they have set designers who just draw. They draw what the production designer wants have developed. They develop the sets. They're like blueprint artists.
Okay.
They're like architectural renderers. And then there's also under the production designer the whole construction department, which are painters and welders and builders and carpenters and those sorts of people. Then that's one department. And then there's the set decorating department, which is a separate department, but the set decorator takes the cue from the production designer because the production designer is the main, the main visual person. And then the set decorator, basically, if you think of it in very simple terms, the production designer is like the architect, and the set designer is like the interior designer that also personalizes. You just don't build a kitchen and put stuff in the kitchen. You put dirty dishes in the kitchen and smelly cabbage in the kitchen and dirt on the floor and the wastebasket filled and, all that sort of thing. And then under the set decorator, there's the lead person who is like the foreman of the crew who has to make sure all the furniture's where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be, and the sets are struck and all the purchase order numbers are done. And they have set dressers then that actually physically do the work and put all the stuff in the set and take everything out of the set.
Wow. So you go to work at ABC Circle Films or ABC for a television show, right?
Yes, I was on a TV show called Fantastic Journey, and it was a science fiction. Well, actually, when I was a set dresser, and then I was doing different shows, Police Story, Medical Story, Western called The Quest, and then I was moved up to lead person. So I had an actual crew with a decorator. This is after I got in the union, and I was a lead person for about a year and a half. And then when I was working as a lead, Audrey said, we have this TV show coming up, and we're going to put you on it. And I was like, okay, am I ready for this? And I just jumped into it, and it worked.
And that was Logan's Run?
No, Logan's Run was the second one, which was a
Okay.
TV series, Logan's Run. It wasn't the movie.
Not the movie, right.
Yeah. The same producer who did Fantastic Journey was doing this TV series, Logan's Run. And he liked what I did on Fantastic Journey. He said, I want you to do Logan's Run. And so I did that. And then I had all my days, and I was in the union as a set dresser. Or no, as a set decorator, but I had to take a test. The test was like an 8-hour test. You had to break down a script, and there was an oral test that I had to take. I studied the book for like a year. When I was riding in the car, I would have my crews
Oh, wow.
quiz me, because you had to know different types of furniture and the history of furniture and all that sort of thing, which really didn't make any difference, but it was just what the test was then. And then I passed that, and then I was a set decorator.
Oh, so that's cool. I didn't realize there was you had to qualify for this.
Oh,
This
yeah.
isn't just like,
Yeah. Then you did. Now you don't, but you did then.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you got a big break on Robert Wise's Star Trek?
Well, because I had done the producer of Logan's Run and Fantastic Journey was doing a TV series called Dallas, which I think people are familiar with.
Who shot JR?
And exactly. And he asked me if I would do that. And I said, no, I really want to hold out for films, because it was a different feeling then. TV and film now are kind of equal as far as pay scale and prestige and, and quality. Then TV was sort of on the back burner. It was just like, it was less money, it was less time, it wasn't as prestigious, and I really wanted to do movies. So I held out. I had some other things offered. And then because the union, again, was completely booked, everybody was working, I had done 2 TV series that were science fiction. I just luckily got Star Trek. They took a chance on me, and then on that movie, I was nominated for my first Academy Award.
That's nuts.
Total fluke.
That's like unbelievable.
I mean, a fluke, yeah.
So, what was that like? You get nominated for an Academy Award. How did you find out? What's the what was that?
Well, I wasn't really aware of it all. It was all new to me, and I wasn't really a movie person. I didn't go to a lot of movies when I was young, and I didn't have any stars that it wasn't that kind of a world for me. They called me up that day. I didn't even know they were announcing them, and said I was nominated. And it was like, oh my God, I had to sort of read up on it. I wasn't that aware. Yeah.
Did you call home and tell your brothers and your family?
Once it really sort of, was in my brain, like it really happened. Yeah.
What did they say? I mean, what was the?
Oh, my mother was really proud. I don't know if my brothers even knew it, because they didn't care about it. I'm sure. I don't know. And I remember when I went to it, I went by myself. I had a man's tuxedo made, and I went in my own car.
For the first one.
Yes, and in the audience, I didn't know any of this stuff. In the audience, they have seat fillers, right? But I wasn't aware of that. So when I would get up to go to the bathroom, and I would come back, there'd be somebody in my seat, because they have to have people in the seats when the cameras are on them. And I was just like, what's this person doing in my seat? And then I sort of got it. Oh yeah, they have to. But it was funny the first time, because I didn't realize it.
We believe in the fresh, the healthy, the good. Station Square proudly offers new seasonally available non-GMO ingredients, along with organic beef options, all-natural non-GMO poultry, and fresh seafood delivered daily. Station Square, where the magic happens.
Let Salvatore's Howland host your special event in their new banquet facility. Up to 150 guests will enjoy a metropolitan vibe, full-service bar, and customized menu. Call 330-609-7777 or visit salvatoreshowland.com.
With that buzz of select Brazilian Dolce coffee beans, that brew Ipanema's seductively sweet beach coffee, they mingle a flawless measure of their crisp Darlene lager. Somehow, somewhere in a secret lab with modern methods, they blend a perfectly balanced, light, uplifting, gold medal winning brew known as the Percolator. Available at Modern Methods Tap Room or the new Darlene Lounge on Courthouse Square in downtown Warren.
You've been a production designer or a set decorator on some of the biggest sci-fi movies in the history of cinema, and certainly Blade Runner being like everybody's go-to. I know when we were texting, I was telling you I was watching Buckaroo Banzai, which I know we didn't get a chance to really talk about on camera, but that's another one of those movies that this is, for listeners out there that aren't familiar with the comic world, that's a Marvel product. Buckaroo Banzai was a Marvel property. And so it's like you got to work on not only Star Trek, one of the biggest sci-fi franchises, but one of the first real comic book movies, even though I don't think it was quite billed as that at the time.
No.
But there were comic books in the, they were aware, right? The characters from Buckaroo Banzai were aware that they were in a comic book because they had comic books in the.
I don't know. They must have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they must have been informed of that. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean in the movie, almost like kind of breaking the fourth wall, right? Because they're like, oh, hey, the Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, right.
And then they had a band too. It was like the something Samurais or something. Buckaroo Banzai, the character, was like supposedly half English and half Japanese, but the band was called like the Hong Kong Juggernauts or something.
Boy, I don't remember any of that. Oh man, it was so long ago. Jeez.
Well, how did you get to those projects from, what's the progression? You get done with Robert
I was
Rice's
finished with,
Star
and I was
Trek.
off for a little while. I held out a little while because, my name wasn't around, and plus you're nominated and then it's like 6 months before it even happens. But the same art director on that ABC Circle film who introduced me to the woman who, got me into the union, he called me to do a movie called Fatso, which Anne Bancroft was directing, and they had a lot of women. They had a woman cinematographer, and there weren't many women cinematographers. And then after that, a little bit later, he recommended me to another person, and I got hired on another movie called It's My Turn. It was Michael Douglas and Charles Grodin and Jill Clayburgh. And then I got called in on Blade Runner as the second decorator. They knew that I had done Star Trek, and again, it was busy, and there was a decorator on Blade Runner for the interiors, and he couldn't handle them all. And so I was called in as the exterior decorator. And 2 days after I was there, he had a tragedy in his family, and he had to leave, and they put me into the interior position and hired someone for the exterior, and Ridley looked at those sets on the exterior about a week in progress, and he didn't like them, and he let that person go, and they made me the decorator for the whole movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about fortuitous happenings.
And Ridley was, if Ridley liked you, if you got him, if he could say something very quickly and you got it and you went off and did what he asked, you were in. And luckily that we had that sort of simpatico. We understood one another. There were several people on the film that didn't quite get him, so there was a lot of turmoil on that set. But the art director, not the production designer, but the art director and I really got him, and so he was happy with everything. It was really great.
Now, was he like, because now he's like Ridley Scott,
right?
But was he like that well known back then?
He was just starting.
He came from the commercial world.
Yeah, he was just starting, but he was a very famous commercial world, and he was an artist. He was an illustrator and an artist, and so he wasn't as high up as he is now, or he was soon to be, but he just kind of was just doing his thing, and he just plowed right through. And we shot a really long time. We went double over time that we were supposed to shoot.
Yeah.
And the last day of filming was 22 hours long. And we had one set that he conceived, and we had literally, and it was a huge set on the movie, 36 hours, where we all stayed awake. We never went to sleep. 36 hours from the time it was conceived till the time the lights and the camera rolled onto the set.
Now, how does that work? Because you're getting a day rate?
It works, and it makes you want to think you're going to die. My rate's a flat.
Oh, okay.
So I could work 1 hour, or I could work 24 hours, and I'd get the same amount of money.
So there's no overtime. There's no time.
Well, there's
and a half.
overtime. There's not if you're on a flat, which a decorator, a production designer, the hourly workers, the grips, the camera operators, but the above the line people, the main people, are on flats. Now, if you work a 6th or a 7th day, then your 6 days rated time and a half on a 5-day division, or double time on Sunday for the 5-day division.
So you went 36 hours straight.
Mm-hmm. I did a lot of 20 hours on that movie, a lot of 20 hour days. Yeah.
You said earlier that there were pins that they made, like I survived
Blade Runner. Yeah. Yeah. And then the sweatshirts with Will Rogers never met Ridley Scott. But I loved him. I thought he was just brilliant and wonderful, and I had a great time.
Well, and you ended up working with him again.
Yeah,
right?
on Someone to Watch Over Me.
And that's Tom Berenger?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And Mimi Rogers.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of talk about that, I guess, a little bit. The difference between, here's Ridley Scott and Blade Runner, and then there's Ridley Scott and Someone to Watch Over Me, and that kind of takes place in like the real world versus the sci-fi fantasy world. Is it what's more difficult and what's more fun, and what do you prefer? The making stuff up, kind of making the future as the way you see it, or finding things that reflect the character in reality, like in the real world?
Well, I think they're both fun, because for different reasons. It's much harder to do a world that's not that's not reality. It's much harder because you have to make it all up and you have to find it or manufacture it, or it's much easier to do a movie where you're going out and finding things, paintings and tables and whatever you're doing, even if it's a 1940s dentist office. In LA, you just go to the place where you order all the 1940s dentists. It's like there's prop houses everywhere. So it's much easier. But there's so many other things involved than just finding the stuff and putting it in that can make it harder. Changes in schedule, changes in dialogue, your budget's cut for reasons, just crazy, crazy things. So it's all an adventure. That's for sure.
The sci-fi world, when you guys were creating things like from scratch or looks from scratch, how did you go about that? Where did you source the material from? Because there weren't things that you could just
tons of electronic stores, places, and scrap metal places, and just junk places with junk. Because you needed hoses and vacuform pieces and anything that wasn't particularly designed, and you just had to there's a lot of retrofitting. You'd take something and you'd just retrofit stuff on it. You'd take it to the prop shop and you'd say, okay, I need this to come out of here and this to come out of here and this to connect to this, and it just was it grew like that.
Did you do a lot of that stuff on Blade Runner?
I did a lot of it on Blade Runner. Yeah, both of them. But and don't get me wrong, lots of pieces were designed and fabricated, and that's all part of anything that's structural or attached is the art department production designer part, as far as the production designer is also in charge of the look of the film, but set decorating is looser. You can move it around. So yeah, there was a lot of that on any science fiction movie I've ever done. Yeah.
So some of the pieces, because and there's so many of those pieces that are or those sets that are iconic, right? It's raining and Decker's eating, the noodles, and the people are walking around with lit up umbrellas, or they're inside the Tyrell building, and what were some of those pieces, some of those brushstrokes that were yours? When you see that movie.
Oh boy, it's hard to remember. I mean, anything that the actor's carrying is a prop, so it's not set decoration. But even finding little weird cups for the little noodle place, or different shaped spoons, or any of that little paraphernalia, it was you could use anything for a container, or when the windows were dressed. It's really hard to remember because, gosh, I was 30, so it was 44 years ago, right? Yeah. But you just find stuff and sort of make it up and shove it together and have it painted, and it was all just found objects everywhere. The basements of the prop house, but it's all hard to remember just because there was so much of it, and the trash we had to come up with. And save and use again, and save and use again. So we had to have massive amounts of people just in a room, just crumpling up stuff and dipping it in dark dye, and vermiculite for the dirt, and making mixtures. It's just constant. And when we had the one bar scene where we had to do that in 36 hours, there were a bunch of candelabras, and they were all drip. He just wanted all these drips. So we just hired 12 people with blowtorches, and they were just sitting there just blowing the wax and dripping.
It's unbelievable to think about all the different people in all the different departments on these massive movies. I mean, how many people worked on Blade Runner, if you had to estimate?
Gosh, even in the construction department, there must have been 300 or 400. On a set, there's usually about 100, 150 people all told on a movie between the various people. But then when you take each department and how many people they each had to have, because it was such a massive thousands.
Wow.
Yeah, just crazy.
Does it get confusing because you don't know everybody? How do you keep everybody together?
Well, that's why everybody has a specific job. When someone will say, well, that guy's just sitting around. He's just getting paid sitting around, and this guy's moving. Because if you don't pay attention to your particular job, and you're not there for when they need you to move the cable, to move the shiny board, to move whatever, they're screwed, right? Because if every minute you lose a lot of money. So everybody has a specific job. They're in a specific union for that job, and they know what to do. And on a film like that, because the upper echelon usually are the cream of the crop, then anybody they hire is going to be the cream of the crop as well. So everybody's pretty in tune.
You said that production went over schedule.
Oh my God!
Several. What was
very much? I think we went 3 months over shooting.
Wow.
And the last day of shooting was 22 hours because they kept saying, "This is your last day, Ridley." And they would do that. They had been doing that for weeks, right? And he would just ignore them. And then finally they had like some bigwigs come down and say, "This is your last day." And that's when we were shooting the scene outside on the roof where Rutger Hauer and Harrison Ford were having their duel or whatever.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier on, they were snockered. They were passing around a bottle of Jim Beam, and they were having a great time. And then we lost light, right? And it started to get, we didn't lose light. It was starting to become light. It was starting to become daytime because it was a nighttime shot. And so we started gaining light, and it was like, oh my God. So we literally took the rooftop over to a stage and set it up on the stage, and they lit it, and the floor wasn't hot mopped, and they had a rain scene in there, so they wrecked the stage. They had paid a lot of money to fix that stage, and they continued that on stage, and it was flawless. You never saw the difference in the lighting. You never saw when the break happened, in reality, when it was really outside and when they moved it, and that was 22 hours.
I can't wait. I'm excited to go back to watch the film.
Yeah, look at that scene.
Yeah. I started watching it over the weekend.
And they were climbing and doing stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my God. I'm telling you, it's a wonder they didn't.
That's incredible. Was that movie over budget too? Because it was over over months?
Massively over budget.
Wow.
Massively. Yeah.
And you'd said earlier, it was not deemed a success at the box office.
No, it was not deemed a success at the box office. And the year that it was nominated, it's so funny. When it was nominated, I was sitting next to the art director, right? Because they put you together, right, in the seats. And Gandhi was nominated with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I've been nominated before where I didn't think we deserved it. I thought this movie was they worked much harder. Because you, as a production designer or a decorator, you know how hard somebody works on a movie in what they have to do, to get it together. And sort of that's how when I'm voting every year, I know what it takes.
You're a member of the Academy.
Yeah.
Or
I am. Oh, I remember. I'm just not on the board
you're
anymore.
Not on the board anymore.
Okay.
So,
you know what it takes. So tell me where I've lost my train of thought here. Sorry.
Well, you were saying you were sitting with.
Sitting with David and Gandhi won, right? And he's mumbling to me, "A bunch of rocks and sheets. It's just a bunch of rocks and sheets." I was dying laughing.
Was that the second nomination for you? Was for Blade Runner?
Yeah, Blade Runner was the second. Yeah.
So how far apart? That was a few films later.
I think it was every 3. I think I was nominated for Star Trek, and 3 years later was Blade Runner, and then 3 years after that I think was The Color Purple, and 3 years after that I think was Rain Man, and then there was a 5-year period, and it was Toys was the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I know that it was sort of I remember with Toys, it was because Avalon actually was right around a time where it would have been the third one, and that's one where we thought we were a shoe-in, but there were so many other ones that were also shoe-in. So and nobody really saw Avalon, but that movie was a toughie. That was one of the hardest movies I've ever
Barry
done.
Levinson?
Barry Levinson, yeah. We had 211 sets, and we shot them in 11 weeks. And they were all period and different periods. So that's a tough one, when you're shooting a street scene and you've got all kinds of modern stuff and you have to get it all out of the shot and convert it to 1916 or 1933 or whatever. That was a tough movie. Blade Runner was my hardest, and Avalon was my second hardest as far as physical whip beating.
What was the movie that was the most fun What was your favorite?
I had a lot of favorites. I loved working with Carl Reiner because he knew what he was doing. We were just shooting a fun little
Summer School
movie called Summer School, and he would, we'd come in every day at 8. We'd be gone every day between 5 and 6, no matter what. He got his movie finished, and it was the Dodger playoffs, and everybody was into it. And so every time there was something was going on, he'd stop film, and we'd all watch the TVs, and then we'd go back to shooting. So that was one of my easier ones. But I've had a lot of them where they were just basically fun. I really loved doing Liar Liar. That was fun because that was the first movie I did with Tom Shadyac, and I've done 5 with him now, and I just loved working with him. We had a great time. That was I was a production designer on that. Yeah.
And you were a production designer on the Summer School too, right?
No, I was a
You
set
were still a
decorator.
set decorator.
I was a set decorator until 1993. From 77 to 93, and then from 93 to 2008, so it's like a split in half.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the difference in responsibility? I mean, was a huge difference in responsibility once you got to production designer?
Huge production designer. First of all, when you're a production designer, there's the director, the production designer, the first AD, the producer, and the cinematographer, and you're the core, and you're hired way ahead of time, and you kind of develop everything first, and then they start bringing in the people who work with you. And you're responsible for that whole, everything.
So they give you a script and you start breaking it down, or how does that work?
Yeah, you get a script and you break it down. Yeah. What you need and what your budget's going to be. You work with your construction coordinator and decide what your budget is. Then you go to the production manager and he tells you what it's going to be.
He goes, you don't have that much money to work with.
Right, but I had a reputation enough that I was a responsible person too, and they knew I didn't go flamboyantly over budget or anything, and I was fortunate to work with the same people a lot. So you get to know people's working methods, and they trust you, and all that sort of thing.
Beside Shadyac, you worked with Barry Levinson a couple times?
Yeah, I think 5 movies with Barry.
Yeah. Besides Rain Man and
Rain Man, Avalon. Jimmy Hollywood.
Oh.
And then he did a movie during Jimmy Hollywood where I was helping him out until he got a decorator. I was on it I sort of set the whole thing up, and it began with a D, and I can't remember it, and it was Michael Douglas, and anyway, and then I think, and there was one more, I'm thinking there was one more, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was only 4.
Well, you've worked with some incredible, the creme de la creme of directors. Barry Levinson, Steven Spielberg, Ridley Scott, Carl Reiner,
John Schlesinger,
Joe Johnston,
Zemeckis,
Robert Zemeckis. Yeah. Jesus God. What are some things that all those guys have in common, and then what were some things that each guy did different that you appreciated or maybe didn't appreciate?
Well, they all I thought were really incredible directors, and they all everybody takes a different approach and has their specialties, and then where they can sort of just go, well, I'm not in their brain. I think they're going, well, that's not my thing. You're hired for that. You just go ahead and do that kind of thing. Spielberg was the one that I thought was just the most in command of who he was and what he wanted to do in a really good, brilliant way. I mean, but then Barry was very, very low key. I mean, real soft spoken, and had this real dry sense of humor, and just kind of handled things very low key, and pretty much we stuck with scripts. For instance, with a lot of directors, you'll get a call sheet. I remember on The Color Purple we had a call sheet, and our call sheets were sort of whatever we wanted to do that day. It was and we had different periods. We had, I think, 1916 to, I don't know, I can't remember what the years were, but we had different seasons and different years, and every season there was different. There was snow, or there were flowers, or there was corn, or there was, and I remember a good story from Color Purple. Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey, myself, Aggie, the costume designer, and Layla, one of the girls in production. We were all sitting out on the front porch. We were waiting for him to set up, and we were all talking. We were talking about girl stuff. We were talking about getting cramps. And we were all comparing that. And what I thought was amazing about Whoopi Goldberg was, she used to get the crap beat out of her from Mister. I mean, she got beat up, right? And she'd just be out there and we'd be laughing and talking, and they'd go, Whoopi, they need you on set. And she'd go in there and get in character, like in just not even a second. She'd just be right into that spot. It was amazing.
Wow.
But what I started out saying was that kitchen, if you saw the movie, went from being a spotless kitchen to flies and garbage and crap everywhere. We must have changed that 10 times. First, it's built, it's nice, it's not nice, it's nice, it's not. Oh, today we're coming in and it's 1915 and the kitchen is spotless and there's sunflowers out. And the next day you come and it's snow out and the kitchen's nice and it's just was crazy.
Did that drive you crazy?
No, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
No, you never, ever, ever, almost, I've almost never been on a movie, even Carl Reiner's, where you shoot everything you think you're going to shoot when you're going to shoot it. Because things change and happen, and writers are changing things, and actors have different, things they have to do, and you kind of always you are kind of married to the actors' schedules. If they made a contract with someone and said, well, I can't be here these days, or I have obligations, then they'll figure out something else to do. And you always have to, if you have kids, there's a whole different way of shooting because they can only be on the set for so long. If you're night shooting for a while, then you have to go into day shooting. You have to make that transition. So it's a crazy, crazy world. It really is. It's not like a real world, that's for sure. Thank God.
Was that appealing to you to have this schedule that was kind of all over?
Actually, no, because I am so OCD. I'm like I have nothing out of place. I can close my eyes and find anything in any drawer in my house. I'm like never, for me, if I'm 10 minutes early, I'm late. It's like, so I just had to give that all up. And once in your brain, you can give all that up and you just go, well, this is the way it is. These things are going to change constantly. You can be ready for something and they'll call you up and you have to get ready for another thing, and you just do it because that's part of the job.
Want to be debt-free faster, save money in taxes and insurance, and retire with more wealth? Call Zach Byler of Prosperity Partners Financial Solutions today for full-service financial advisory. 330-219-5225. If you're looking to buy new or sell your current home or commercial property in Northeast Ohio or Northwestern Pennsylvania, look no further than Brokers Realty at brokerssold.com. Top Shelf Bar, 450 wines on hand, and your choice of local craft beers, including Modern Methods Brewery Double IPA, now available at the Station Square Restaurant.
I think you said something really brilliant earlier today, and you said, I didn't live to work, I worked to live. And so
yes.
Was that always the case? You always felt that way?
Yeah, it was I felt so privileged to have the job, so lucky to have the job. I mean, it gave me a whole world I never would have ever known, but it wasn't my life. If someone said, I'll give you enough money to live exactly how you're living without doing movies, would you stop doing movies? I'd be going, oh yeah. Because I did. I started saving my money when I was 31 years old, and I never touched it so that I could retire in my mid-50s. And when I retired, I was kind of, I don't say this in a, braggy kind of way, but I was still at the top of my game. I was working all the time. And I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Were you burned out? Or
just burned out. There was, because you can never make appointments. You can never, you might have something you're looking forward to and you can't do it because you got to work a Saturday because they've changed the schedule and you got to have something else ready for a Monday. And then I'm not a flyer. I'm a fearful flyer, and I was flying all over the place and being away from my home. And I love my home. My house is like, I love my house, any house I'm in. And I had to go away for 6 months or 8 months. And so it's a vagabond kind of life sometimes.
Yeah. Like a gypsy.
Yeah.
Traveling
but
gypsy.
I'm not complaining. Like I say, I felt really, really lucky, and there were wonderful things about it. I met some great people who are still in my life. They're still my friends. But I like not working.
Did you realize at the time, I'm kind of shifting gears a little bit and backpedaling, but you had mentioned there were only so many set dressers, like one from Paramount, one from Universal,
3 women,
and you, and you kind of you were one of the women that broke the glass ceiling
yes.
into these jobs. Were you aware of that at the time?
Yes, because
And how important that
yes,
was?
because Audrey had said we've got to get women in the set dressers. There were women set decorators, but not the people who slug the furniture around. Not the set dressers. And she said we got to get women in here. So, yeah, I was completely aware of it. And then once I became a decorator in '77, I still was one of the only women. When we were in the vans going location scouting and on the set and having production meetings, there were very few women.
What was like a day-to-day, like, because you had mentioned like we'd go to this prop house or we'd go to this store, like were you trying to find stuff too? You're trying to acquire
you have
things?
to acquire everything.
Yeah.
And it depended on what stage you're in. Once you start and you break the script down and then you get your budget, you know what you have to get, and I always had a driver, because in LA, if I were going to take my own car, I wouldn't get my work done, because you had to have someone to be able to drop you off, because you couldn't, you had to, like, a driver would drop me off. I'd have a crew member with me. I'd go in the store and say, okay, we want that. They'd gather it up while I was in the car making calls, doing whatever, and then they'd come and then we'd go to the next prop house. When I'd go to the prop house, I'd have my crew with me, and they'd be following, and they'd just tag the stuff we wanted. And I had a knack. One of my knacks was I could do, if I had a movie that had 100 sets or 150 sets or 20 sets, I could do them all at the same time. I had them all in my brain, and I knew exactly what I needed for all of them. And I could just go, okay, that goes in that set, that goes in that set. And I'd make big production sets. If we were in town, I'd make big production rentals, and then they'd let me have for one amount. I could take what I wanted and keep it for as long as I wanted, so we could have it all boxed up and ready to go in the sets. And I remember, that reminds me, you like me to tell little stories?
Yeah,
right?
I love it.
So
yeah.
when we were on Avalon, we actually shot in a brownstone, in a real one. We didn't build a lot of sets on that. And people were living there, and we could only shoot on the weekends. And so we would go in and take all their stuff out. We were only on the bottom floor. Took all their stuff out, put all our stuff in. And then I had this little blue knick-knack, and it was sitting on the TV, and I knew exactly where it was on the TV. Like, I can go in my house now and know if someone has moved a candle 1/4 of an inch. I know it, because oh, geez, I'm ruining this whole
okay.
thing.
You're good.
When I do anything for myself, I'm looking at it from every angle, just like a camera. And I have to know that from every angle, this is going to look good next to this, from here, here, and here.
Wow.
And so I was so used to that. So I had this little blue thing, and we had dressed that. We'd done it 4 times. We cleaned it out, dressed it, took our stuff out, put their stuff in, took it, like, for 4 weekends in a row. And the last weekend, the little blue thing wasn't there, right? There's a ton of stuff in there, and I said to Nancy, one of the writers, I said, where's the little blue dog? It's not there. And she said, Jesus Christ, how do you, she was like, I can't believe you know that's missing. And I said, yeah, it's missing. We got to find it. It's been shot. It won't match.
It'll be out of, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you
Yeah.
find it?
Oh, yeah.
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 Did you take, like, I mean, did you have some sense of, like, interior design, or take interior design classes, or decorating?
No,
how did you?
I just, for some reason, it was innate with me. When I was younger, I decorated my room, and I would find, like, something in the neighborhood. I remember getting this we used to go antiquing in, like, barns, like people were throwing stuff out. It was, Ohio, Pennsylvania, this old nightstand, and I painted it white and took some lilac on it and changed all the knobs. I was changing stuff on my clothes. I made my own clothes, my own patterns. I was changing stuff on every, if I had a bedspread, I might add something to it and take something off of it. And I just was always aware of it. I don't know where I got it, but the design part of it and the decorating part of it was the easiest part. The actual, oh yeah, I know what to do there. It was all the other politics and budgets and changing and stuff that I had to, go along with. But it's just been something that's kind of innate with me.
Well, it's funny, or not funny, but it's, Kent State, and I don't know if it was back then. My wife's a Kent State graduate, and she was like, oh, all my roommates were fashion merchandising, because it's like, that's a big program there. And she went into social work, and that was her calling, but she's real into fashion. So we go back, and she's like, there's the fashion building. And I wasn't aware, about Kent State. But, because that program is so big, and you seem like you're very, you have a great sense of fashion and the fabric.
Yeah,
and
it was
stuff.
either fashion or I could have gone into fashion as well because I'm
Okay.
into that as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, why did you choose art and film?
I think because I didn't really think of fashion as far as a career, even though I was always wearing vintage stuff and putting stuff together. Because I was a painting, I always painted in high school, so I didn't connect it. But when I went out to California, it could have gone one way or the other because I was really also into fashion as well.
Oh.
And my niece, Chelsea DeScenna, she went to Kent in fashion, and one of the people that I used to work with called me up to do, this was early on, called me up to do the Tom Cruise movie that they did down in Florida. I can't remember what the name of it was. It was about a long time ago.
Well, his mom used to live in Florida. I'm wondering.
But it was a movie, Adam Shankman, who I did, bedtime stories with, and the last movie I did with, the producer called me up to do that, and I said, I'm not working anymore, not happening, because it was way later. And I said, but my niece is trying to get into fashion. Can you put her on as a PA? And he put her on as a PA, and now she's in New Orleans. She's in the fashion
that's cool.
union, and she's a fashion designer now.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was the movie though?
I can't remember. It was rock and roll or
when he plays like a rock and roll guy.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but it was
movie?
And it was like, I don't know how long ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah, he kind of plays a rock star. I think it's a musical.
Rock of Ages?
Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. What year was that?
2012.
Yeah, 2012. Okay, there you go.
Wow.
That's just about right.
That's funny
Yeah.
that you say, because when you say you say 2012, I'm like, oh, that was like a couple years ago. Like, no, it was like a dozen years ago. Yeah. That's wild. What's it like for you now to look at this incredible body of work and to think that you and your colleagues really designed what the future, at that time looked like, and then became, kind of what it is now. Like I always think about, we talked about this earlier, like the communicators on Star Trek. Like it was like, boop, boop, and then you had the flip phones, or you'd have like these like really aerodynamic cars in some of these other movies, and then now we have like Tesla and these aerodynamic cars. Like it's like, what came first, the cart or the horse? Was that the art that inspired the actual the products later, or was it the products that inspired the art? Like, I don't know. Do you ever think about like, holy shit, I like was a part of designing what the future looked like back in the 80s in some of those like Blade Runner and Buckaroo Banzai, and now the stuff looks like that now.
Well, I never think about it, but now that you've mentioned it, it is something to think about. But it was researched a lot. Whenever we could research, we researched how things were going, because people sort of have an idea of what the future is. Not like we do now, because we didn't have the internet then. We didn't have computers, or we literally had beepers and had to get out if we were called, had to get out of the truck or the cars and go to a payphone for them to get us to. And we had one of the first mobile phones, with the case, the thing, and that was like huge. Oh my God, that was like the best. But now, it's like so easy, which is probably why they don't give people as much time as we got. So much time to prep a film. Now you don't have any time.
Yeah,
at
you
all.
said like it was between 4 and 6 months. To
Oh
prep
yeah,
the film.
for a set decorator. I've been on movies. I was on movies. The reason, like, if you look at my resume, movies are a year and apart, because I was on a movie for a year or more sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
because you have to prep it, and then sometimes they'll keep pushing it, and then you're shooting sometimes 4, 5, 6 months, and then you deep prep it, and so it takes a while.
is there a different rate for the prep versus the shooting? Same rate?
No.
Wow. So you're getting paid for that whole duration.
Yeah. But you sometimes work harder during prep than you do when you're shooting. Because once you get to about the middle of the shoot, you can kind of breathe easy, because you've got everything prepped, and you just have to make sure. Like when we did Evan Almighty, I don't know if you saw it, but he was in an ark. Yeah. We had that whole housing development there. We built that. There were no houses there. We built although we built, like, not the ones that were in a distance, but we built like 12 houses in different stages, and his house, and more than half of an actual real ark exterior. Then and that was in Virginia, and then at Universal Studios where we shot it, we are we good?
Yeah.
Universal Studios where we started, we had an interior of one end of the ark, an exterior of where the ark runs into. We built some of the White House and the peak of the ark, and there's this huge gimbal or this huge cyc at Universal that has a sky and you can fill it with water. It's just mammoth. It's hundreds of feet, and we put a big gimbal in there so we could shoot the ark and shoot the waves out of it, and that was, once that was done, it was like there were all minor things to do, but that was like, oh, okay. Now we can breathe. Yeah.
Some of the other projects that you worked on, like Harry and the Hendersons and the Goonies, what were some of those pieces also, some of those, what were some of the props, or not props, that's the wrong term. What were some of the design elements in there that, were like, when you see those movies, you're like, oh, that's the piece that I did.
For Goonies on the ship, everything on the ship. I argued and won the argument that we should have actual gold-plated doubloons that were going to be shot close up, because you can tell when you spray paint that stuff. And we ordered all of those skeletons that we dressed in all the old pirate costumes that we also had to be really careful with because we couldn't age them properly. We kind of had to put old pieces of cloth in because they were real costumes, and we didn't want to wreck real from the costume department. We got the skeletons; they were real skeletons from India. They were real people.
You said this earlier.
Yeah.
This is like,
and it was creepy. And the production designer, Michael Riva, who I did Color Purple with him. I did Buckaroo Banzai with him. We were good friends. Really, another brilliant mind. The first night before we were supposed to shoot it, once we got it all dressed, and Dick Donner shot it, and Dick came in and okayed everything. We were like 2 ways away from shooting. He took a cot and slept on it. And I thought, okay, he's never like a woo-woo guy, right? He's just like a regular guy. And he said, I think I want to sleep here. And I said, Michael, those are like real people. Those are like real skeletons. You're going to sleep here? And he said, I'm not afraid of that. It like freaked me out. We had rat skeletons too. I had all real rat skeletons in little corners, and aged them all down.
Oh, on the ship.
On the ship, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a fun thing to dress, yeah.
So I never, so anybody listening out there and you watch Goonies, One-Eyed Willie was a real person. Was a real skeleton.
At one point, yes, it's a real person.
Huh?
Can I
Yeah.
ask really quick, how do you get a hold of?
Yeah, how do you get real skeletons?
Well, I just say to my lead man, we need real skeletons. Research this, and that's what we need. Then I'm off to my next meeting, right?
So you order these things from India, and they show up.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
For research, they get them for research, medical research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I just remember they came from India. That's all that because they were little.
Because me and Liam are going to go research it. I want to get one so I can keep Uncle Louie company. So we'll have a skeleton stand-in instead of Uncle Louie. What's the big differences, again, kind of to go backwards a little bit, the difference between working in TV and working in features? Was there a huge difference? Like, obviously you wanted to work in features because it was more money and more prestige, but like from an application standpoint, like what's the difference between that process and that art form? And I mean, they're obviously similar, but is there big differences between working in TV and working in film?
Then there was.
Yeah.
You didn't get any time. You didn't get any money. Your salary was like half the salary. The money they gave you for sets, because there wasn't prestige TV then, it was just network. There were a few things that, they spent money on. And then you just worked those 22 episodes and you were done, right? And And even actors wanted to do movies. Everybody wanted to do movies because the money, the prestige, the time, it just was a different world. Now with streaming and the fact that there's incredible movies on HBO and Netflix and everything's mixed, now it's completely, they pay really good rates for those kinds of things. And you have, you still now with the way things are, they still don't get very much time. There's never enough time now because they've also added a shopper category to a decorator because the decorator doesn't even have time to go out and shop anymore.
Oh.
It's just really crazy.
So what's the big difference? Like things have changed, obviously, in all forms of media. What are the big changes, like from the time that you were doing it and at your height and when you retired versus now? Like
from when I
CGI
retired, CGI.
Yeah.
CGI was just starting to really explode. The last movie I did, which was Bedtime Stories, I still had people literally drawing blueprints. And my illustrator was still illustrating normally. I had another one that was computer illustrating. The graphics were all computerized. Now I think it's all computer. Everything is on the computer. All the drawings, all the illustrations, everything they do. And it's a lot, they'll do a lot more CGI now because it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier in the long run.
It kind of is
and
like
so they don't give you as much time because they think, oh, well, if you just can draw this on this way, it's quicker, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like they take away some of that craftsmanship too, which is why I've really appreciated Chris Nolan's, Oppenheimer with some of these practical effects. Liam and I were talking about it the other day. Like, I like those kind of practical effects because they just look different. There's just something different about it rather than, and obviously CGI is so good today that it's hard to tell the difference between whether it's real or whether it isn't.
And it's great to look at a set like that the painter's aged, that you really good scenic people, and there aren't a lot left, I don't think. There's some incredible scenic people that can just make stuff look like, that you'd never know that it wasn't real or wasn't old or just amazing.
You'd mentioned some actors. Were there any actors that were really great to work with, or were any actors or directors that were like, I'm not going to work with this person again?
Well, there were actors that weren't so easy to work with, and I would never say because I just wouldn't say, and it didn't really affect me other than how they sort of affected the schedule. But I was really fortunate. I worked with some really, really nice. Dustin Hoffman was wonderful. Steve Martin was really great. They're just low key, really nice people. Yeah.
That's another thing I didn't write down and think about, but like the people that you worked with over the years, Robert Duvall, you mentioned
Jack Nicholson, Tom
Goldberg,
Cruise, Whoopi,
wow,
Michelle Pfeiffer, but only cared about meeting Susan Lucci.
Oh yeah,
from All My Children. That made my day.
You are in a documentary called Never Surrender, a Galaxy Quest. Which I haven't seen yet, but you can stream on Amazon. And they interview in it, right?
Yeah, they interviewed everybody. They interviewed everybody.
Yeah, because Galaxy Quest is one of the
and I spilled the beans on that one that the set got melted.
Yeah. If there's someone out there listening that is interested in production design and art, and like what type of advice would you give to somebody that's like coming up through the industry, or they're going to school, or what are some qualities that you need, and what are some paths that you would recommend kind of taking?
Well, it's different now because it used to be working on a union film was the only way to go because all the other stuff was just crap, or they just you worked your butt off and but now it's different. There's a lot of non-union stuff being shot in Los Angeles, commercials and little films, and that if people went out there to LA, they could get their foot in the door that way. However, Los Angeles now is not the place it used to be. They're shooting about, in Hollywood, so to speak, they're shooting about half of what they used to. Vancouver's taken over, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Atlanta. and Toronto. So it's all they farm it out now. It's just if you look at the location list, for instance, for I get this thing where they compare how many locations were being used, or how many location certificate, or what do they call them, permits were pulled for shooting location from 22 and then 23 and then 24. It's like you've got a line this, like 4 inches long in 2022, and then it shrinks down to 3 and then down to 2. So it's like half now is shooting there. A lot of big movies won't shoot there because it's cheaper to go elsewhere, because the labor's cheaper and the stage space is cheaper, because Vancouver has amazing stage space, and so does Atlanta and New Orleans. So it's a lot tougher to break in, but if you really want to do it, you should give it a go. Yeah.
You are a absolute joy to have on. Number one.
Thanks.
And you're a wealth of knowledge. And I appreciate you coming on. Tell us real quick how we interviewed you for what may be called the Museum of Science Fiction Art, or may be called the Museum of Science Fiction and Fantasy Arts. They haven't decided yet.
Which is why I had to do all those promos.
Right. How do you feel about that? Like, you come back to your hometown and like, there's this museum that's they're raising funds for. Like, tell me what your feelings are.
I think it's great. I think it's great that John brought all that stuff free. I mean, and gave all that stuff to them. I think it's great. I think it's a great idea. I hope it brings in also you branch out and have other things other than just the science fiction part of it, right? They were talking about having
fantasy.
Fantasy. Yeah. And I hope it brings people into Warren. I hope it brings tourism in. And I think it's amazing that that's happening. And it's because of him that it started, right? I mean, he brought all that stuff. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. There's a warehouse. I won't say where it's at, but there's a warehouse in Warren that's just filled with the chair from RoboCop and the all these different consoles from all these different different
It's
movies.
like a mini. There's a museum. The Academy has a museum in Los Angeles.
You're in there. You're in there with Blade Runner.
Yeah. And it's quite a moneymaker for them. And I think this is sort of it's sort of like a littler version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was, when we were out there, I was leaving and I wanted to see that museum, so I stopped before I flew out, and I was walking there. I'm like, oh, there's Linda DeScenna's, there's a whole piece, and it's next to Terminator, and there's like the Terminator outfit, and then there's this, I think it was like a payphone, and then like there's like the set design pictures, there's stills. It's pretty amazing.
I know, I've never been.
Really? Oh wow, you would like it.
Oh, I know. I could have gone to the opening. I mean, I could have done all that, but I just
bet.
didn't want to go.
Well, there's a huge wall, like a matte painting that is from North by Northwest, with that.
I've seen pictures.
Oh my God.
Actually, I was in there when they were building it. I took a tour when they were building it and went through when they just were creating the dome, for the.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, they did a couple summers ago, they invited me to, they did a whole retrospective of the director's cut of Blade Runner.
Oh yeah,
and it was
I own it.
Me and David. What?
I own that director's cut. They released a DVD of it.
Yeah, and
it's phenomenal.
I had never seen it.
Oh.
So it was me and David, the art director, myself, and what's her name, who ran through the windows. Actress that Ridley was having an affair with, Joanna Cassidy.
Beautiful.
And one other person, and we were on stage talking about the film, and we were in that theater, and I have been there. That was the first and only time I've been in that area.
You just reminded me of that. She's got that raincoat on,
like
that rain
snake
slicker.
Woman. Yeah. She runs through the plate glass window.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what a great movie.
Yeah.
You're part of cinema history. You've created pop culture history.
I never think of it that way, but I guess it is true. That movie really is, it holds up.
It holds up.
Yeah.
And it set the stage for so many other films.
And when I was there watching it, I hadn't seen it for, oh my God, probably 2 years after it came out, right? And I was now watching it going, oh my God, if I was watching this now, and I'd be thinking, oh man, I'm glad I wasn't the set decorator on that movie. because it looked really hard.
I want to thank you for coming and spending time with us today. It's been absolutely incredible. You are as beautiful on the inside as you are on the outside. For listeners that aren't watching this or can't see on YouTube, Linda is absolutely beautiful, and I was quizzing her on how she keeps looking so young. So
Don't tell my secrets.
No, can I tell you one? I'm gonna start doing yoga like real quick, okay? Because you're doing fantastic.
Well, it was my pleasure.
I'm so appreciative of you coming. Please come once the museum is open. Please come back for the opening.
Well, I come back every year, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have to make this like maybe not the broadcast, but we'll have to make Weston, Maine, and the Warren tour. Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah. I'd love to join you on the bar crawl that you're gonna experience because Warren. Oh. Yeah, because Warren 10 years ago didn't look like what it looks like now.
Give me your number. I'll tell Tom. He'll call you.
Yeah. You have it. I texted you.
Oh, that's right. I have it. You're right.
Linda DeScenna, thank you so much for coming. Good luck in the future of all the things you do. And for listeners out there that want to find out more, check out Never Surrender, a Galaxy Quest, and that's streaming now on Amazon. And I'm going to check it out too.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, until the next time, be kind to one another, stay electrified, and you can check out all the other episodes of the podcast by visiting theprodcast.net. Like and follow us on social media, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.